Hi, I'm Lesley Butterfield. I am a mother of 4 children. I'm a single mom right now, and I live in Virginia. With my 4th child, I experienced something that I had never felt before and never experienced before, and that was postpartum depression. When I was in the thick of it, it was one of the most troubling things that I've ever experienced, because you just lose all hope. I had had a birth photographer because it was our last child, and I had had an epidural for the first time. My plan was for it to just be a wonderful experience that we could document, and I would have my husband and my mother there, and it would be a good experience. In the hospital, actually, during her delivery, she was born without anybody knowing. The nurse came in the room and pulled back the covers, and my baby was on the bed under my leg. And I couldn't feel anything because I had had an epidural, and I didn't know that I couldn't feel anything. I got her home. I actually left the hospital early because I was so traumatized from what happened. The birth trauma changed my life. I remember getting home and just kept reliving what had happened at the hospital. I would have nightmares about her not being delivered safely, about what could have happened, what effects she would still have from the birth. The trauma from that, I just remember, even now, is overpowering to think about. And a few weeks after that, my world came tumbling down and crashing down. I found out about some of my husband's problems that I had no idea were happening. And there was very much a sense of betrayal, a sense of mistrust. I had never experienced compounded trauma like that before. And from the birth trauma to the betrayal trauma that I felt, it really sent me into this state of just extreme hopelessness and sadness and confusion that I now know is postpartum depression. In my postpartum depression, some of the moments that I remember are just wanting and needing to sleep, and that being the only thing that I could really do successfully, or feel like I could do successfully. I was very closed off among friends, family. I missed milestones, that you look forward to. I don't remember her first smile or her first laugh or those kind of things very well, because I was just in a state of fog, really, really bad fog that was so thick, and I couldn't understand what it was and why I couldn't just make myself snap out of it and be happy and be better. And that was very, very hard. It was very hard. When you experience depression like I did, or a mental illness that comes from experiencing trauma, and in my case, really compounded trauma, one on top of another, on top of another, it made it very, very difficult for me to even understand why I was feeling how I was feeling. And what helped me in my postpartum depression, I received some excellent counseling. I learned whatever I could learn about postpartum depression, about trauma, about betrayal trauma, about birth trauma, about the effects of trauma on mental health. I joined a women's support group for trauma survivors, and many of us in that support group dealt with young children, dealt with postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. We dealt with post-traumatic stress from our trauma, and I began to find very much a sense of community. And that's one thing that was very hard when I was going through the actual thick of my postpartum depression, was that I didn't feel like I had a sense of community, and any community that was around me, whether it was even my family or my church community or even my friends, that I couldn't confide in them because I don't feel like they would have understood. And there was very much sort of a sense of shame about experiencing postpartum depression when I have a beautiful family. I have 4 beautiful kids. It was extremely helpful to go to a women's support group. All of us could be vulnerable with each other. We could validate each other in our vulnerability. We could be authentic with each other, and there wasn't any judgment, and there wasn't any shame about those things. And that was probably the single most healing aspect that I can point out. And it wasn't really until I started to kind of untangle the web of what was going on and everything that had happened, my feelings and how they related to my trauma. And it wasn't until I cleared out those cobwebs that I could see just a little bit of hope and a little bit of light. I oftentimes would get up and go in her room and, hold her and just pray that my trauma and the depression that I was feeling could just subside, so that I could enjoy my child and that I could cherish her. It was in those quiet moments when I would be alone with her in her room and rocking her and singing to her that peace did come. That even though I knew I was experiencing something profoundly debilitating and painful and anguishing, that I also knew that it wouldn't last forever. Somehow I knew that, and I don't know how I knew that, I just knew that. Once I kept going to the support group, making friends, owning my story, owning my authenticity, working through the issues, the trauma that had happened in the birth of my daughter, in my marriage, and working through those things little by little. And it took several months, almost a year probably. But once I started doing that, it was like I just kind of climbed out, and that's the only way I can describe it. It got better. It did get better, and I'm so grateful for that.